I'm very excited about the conversation we get to have. I think it's very uncommon that we have so many people who are working in this field in one room at one time to have this kind of dialogue. I'm excited to get our panelists up here to talk a little bit about how they've grappled with some of these questions that we get every day as we advise brands on how they should participate online and what that voice should sound like. And for anyone that's worked in branding for a long period of time, typically the question is, how do I control it? And I think we heard a little earlier that it resists control, but there's still some questions that you need to think about. The first is, what content should you be pushing? So back in August, you may have seen in a couple of the news feeds that there were a couple of hospitals that have started looking at tweeting during surgical procedures. And the hospitals that have done it have had some great PR success. It's been one of those things where it's been touted as a way to involve more people in the community with some of these very complicated experimental surgical procedures. But it's also raised some doubt. How many patients in this room would like to know that your doctor is tweeting off while he's doing a bypass? And that's, I think, a critical question that a lot of brands have to ask is, we can wait. Or as Jeremiah told us, real time is not fast enough. So one of those questions is, if I'm going to push content, which content should I be pushing? What's appropriate for my brand, and what's still, and at the same time, relevant to the audiences that follow me? I think second to that is, are you human or not? So somewhat creepy picture of Bob's Big Boy. But I thought it was a very important point here is that, one of the principles of branding that we talk about a lot, the reason why companies want to build a brand is they want to make it seem more human, particularly in this part of the world. Technology brands are always talking about, we want to seem more human. Microsoft launched a very popular campaign earlier this year that was about real people and their real stories and trying to connect you to that. But when you go onto social media, one of the questions that we're often asked, and we often ask our brand clients, are you communicating as a company, or are you communicating as a person inside that company? Because there's a big difference in the way that the message should be structured and the way that your voice comes across. And I'll be very eager to hear how we have three very different kinds of companies that are out there participating in this field. It'd be interesting, I think, for us to hear how they address that and how they differentiate between something that is more PR-focused and corporate communication geared at investors versus something that may be coming from a scientist or from someone who's a product developer or just someone who happens to work inside and is very active on Twitter. How do you handle this guy? This is Cuddly Bear 36. He has a Twitter account. He's got a Facebook account. Strangely, he's also got a Club Penguin account. And he's got about 30,000 followers, and he started talking very favorably about your brand. What do you do with this person? Do you ignore them? Do you try to ban them? Do you somehow try to maneuver them? I once worked with a great qualitative researcher. We were doing focus groups, and it was for an imaging company, and this guy started talking about really strange technologies none of us had ever heard of. And one of the things she did that was very artful was find a way to engage him in another conversation and tell him that his ideas were so great that she'd like to talk to him in another room, and that way not disrupt the group. How do you do that on Twitter? How do you do that on Facebook? If you see this guy showing up and you want to distance your brand from him, how do you do it without creating a firestorm and creating a crisis? And that's, I think, not ever an easy question that hopefully also we can address today. What's the dividing line between observing your audiences and stalking them? Earlier this year, my daughter was going to take a ride on Alaska Airlines. We had a little mishap at the airport, and when I came back, I think I put something as innocuous as Alaska Airlines customer service fail. And within 5 minutes, I found out they were following me on my Twitter stream, which I got to tell you, really, I found creepy. And I think there is sort of this practice that is going on with brands. I think most of us have heard about Comcast and some of the work that they've been doing in terms of tracking customer complaints and reaching out to people that they see are broadcasting it. But what is that dividing line? It's certainly a useful tool. We saw Steve talk to us about how we can track it on a dashboard. What a bunch of valuable information that we can use in order to think about the way our people are talking about our brands and the way we shape our brands. But how far do you go, and at what point have you crossed a line? And then lastly, which is where I really hope we can start the discussion today with the panel, is this an organic process? Do you let these communities online grow on their own, or are you going to fertilize? Do you actually get in and seed some of that discussion? I thought it was very interesting, the notion of real time is not fast enough. It kind of implies that then what you need to do is actually get in front of it before there's a crisis and it gets out of control, that you actually need to sort of help move things along and get the community talking about things that are relevant to your brand. But sometimes that can come across as very heavy-handed. And, we've seen a number of companies that try that, and it's purely artificial.